My name is Alyssa. Standing on the porch of my childhood home, I raise my glass of wine, the cool air of Columbus brushing against my face. The house behind me glows softly, fully restored. Mom stands beside me, her smile fragile yet genuine. We clink our glasses, and I whisper, to Dad, for building more than a home, for building something worth protecting. As I take a sip, memories flood back, and I'm transported to a time when this house was a battlefield, and my family was on the verge of collapse. I've built my life in New York City. I'm a financial analyst at a top-tier firm in Manhattan. My days are filled with spreadsheets, numbers, and contracts. I've learned to rely on facts and evidence because, in my world, paper doesn't lie, even when people do. I hadn't been back to Columbus in 12 years. I left when I was 18, armed with a scholarship and a burning desire to escape. I promised myself I'd never return to Elm Street, where my childhood home stood. But a phone call from my grandmother changed everything. Her voice, steady yet filled with sorrow, told me that my grandfather had passed away. I booked the first flight home, my carry-on filled with legal documents instead of clothes. As I stepped off the plane, a sense of dread washed over me. I knew this homecoming wouldn't be just about grief, there was something else waiting for me. When I arrived at the house, it looked smaller and more rundown than I remembered. The paint on the shutters was peeling, and the garden was overgrown. I stood at the bottom of the porch steps, my heart pounding. When the door opened, my mother's voice cracked as she said, "Alyssa." She pulled me into a hug, smelling of perfume and cigarettes. For a brief moment, I thought I'd made a mistake by staying away for so long. But then, my stepfather, Tom, filled the doorway. His breath reeked of whiskey. "Welcome back," he sneered. Before I could respond, his fist came across my face, sending my head spinning. The pain was sharp and humiliating, but what hurt more was my mother's reaction. She froze, her eyes darting away as if nothing had happened. I steadied myself and lifted my chin. "This isn't your house anymore," I said. He just laughed. I didn't argue. I knew I had the papers in my bag, proof that the deed was still in my name. I stepped past him into the hallway. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and secrets. The family pictures that once lined the walls were gone, replaced by cheap hunting trophies. The hardwood floors, which my father had refinished by hand, were scuffed and dull. In the living room, Tom was sprawled in my father's old recliner, now covered in a gaudy leather fabric. He tightened his grip on his beer bottle and said, "Look who finally decided to show up." I bit back a reply and started to examine the room. The bookshelves my father had built were replaced with particle board units, and the basketball hoop outside, which my father had put up for my 14th birthday, was gone. That night, after dinner, the house went quiet. But it was a tense quiet, filled with the sound of the TV and the opening of a bottle. I was given a cramped storage room to sleep in. I should have gone to a hotel, but I wanted to see just how far the rot had spread. Around 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Tom's shadow blocked the crack under the door. "Still awake, princess?" he mocked. The door creaked open, and he staggered in. "This is my house. You can't just come back after 12 years and act like you belong." "I don't need to act. I know where I belong," I said calmly. His hand came across my face in a swift slap. My cheek burned, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. At the doorway, my mother's silhouette flickered. She froze, then turned away and said, "It's late. Don't wake the neighbors." And she disappeared into the dark. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my cheek throbbing. Old military instincts kicked in. I took out my phone, switched to selfie mode, and took pictures of the bruise from 3 angles. I opened the secure app my firm used for sensitive reports, timestamped the photos, and filed a detailed log. I heard my grandfather's voice in my head, "Always document. Always keep copies. Don't let anyone tell you what's yours without proof." The next morning, I found the kitchen table buried under a mountain of unopened envelopes. There were mortgage late notices, utility shut-off warnings, and property tax reminders. When my mother shuffled in, she froze and said, "Alyssa, leave those. Your father handles it." I held up a loan renewal statement with a scrawl across the signature line. I'd seen my mother's signature enough to know that this wasn't hers. "Did you sign this?" I asked. Her eyes darted to the coffee pot. "He said we needed it for repairs," she replied. Her silence was answer enough. Tom's voice cut in from the living room. "Don't start with your big city suspicion games. This house needed fixing, and I fixed it. A new garage, a new study, it costs money." I looked out the window. The so-called repairs were shoddy at best. An oversized garage took up half the yard, and the new shelves were made of cheap particle board. By noon, I'd filled half a folder with copies of the documents, photographing each one with my phone. But I needed proof of where the money went. That's when Mrs. Thompson, our neighbor who used to bake me cookies as a child, intercepted me on the porch. She whispered, "I shouldn't get involved, but someone had to keep records." She pressed a small envelope into my hand. Inside were photos of our belongings being sold at a garage sale. My father's stamp collection, my grandmother's silverware, and my childhood paintings were all laid out like trash. I was furious. They weren't just selling objects, they were selling our family history. I slid the photos into my folder beside the forged signatures and overdue notices. I found Mr. Harris's office, a lawyer recommended by my grandmother. He was in his 60s, with a kind face and a steady handshake. "Your grandmother called ahead," he said. "She said you'd be bringing me something important." I set the folder on his desk. He spread out the papers and read through them carefully. Finally, he looked up. "This is substantial. You co-signed the original mortgage with your mother. You added a clause that no major changes could be made without both signatures. That clause is still binding, and these signatures on the refinancing documents are clearly forgeries." He leaned back. "We have grounds for an emergency injunction. We can ask the judge to freeze all property transfers and require court oversight." That afternoon, we stood in front of Judge Miller. Mr. Harris handed him the binder of evidence, with my photos of the bruise on top. The judge flipped through the papers, his expression growing stern. "Injunction granted," he said. "No sale, no transfer, no disposal of assets until review. Miss Thompson, you'll have lawful access to secure the property, accompanied by sheriff's deputies." Outside the courtroom, Mr. Harris handed me a copy of the order. "The sheriff will meet us tomorrow morning. Be prepared. He won't take this quietly." While I was organizing the injunction papers at the hotel, I got a call from Mrs. Jenkins, the principal of the school where my mother worked. "Alyssa, I thought you should know. Your father just made a scene here." I raced to the school. When I arrived, the staff was standing in small groups, whispering. Inside the main office, I found my mother, her face red and blotchy, clutching a stack of folders. Mrs. Jenkins explained, he was shouting in the lobby, yelling about ungrateful daughters and stolen property. We had to escort him out. My mother avoided my eyes, her hands trembling. Back at the hotel, my mother came to my room. She looked defeated. "I can't live like this. Everyone saw. He made me look small in front of people I've worked with for years." I opened the folder that Mr. Harris had prepared, the restoration agreement. It restored the house to its original ownership structure, with protective clauses against further loans or transfers. My mother would have lifetime residency, but Tom's control would end. Her hand hovered over the pen. "If he finds out." "He already knows he's losing," I said. After a long moment, she signed. The strokes were shaky, but they were a step towards breaking free from Tom's control. The contractors started work on the house. One day, while I was showing them around, the lead carpenter, Mike, paused in the basement. "This wall doesn't sound right," he said. Minutes later, they broke through the plaster to reveal a narrow compartment. Inside was a bundle of papers and an envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. I sat on the steps, my fingers trembling as I opened the letter. My father's words filled the page. He wrote about his pride in me, his warnings about the house, and his plea for me not to let anyone take it from us. "This place is more than bricks and mortar. It's our history. Guard it." That evening, there was a knock on the door. It was Sarah, a friend of my father's from the army. She was carrying a small box. "I served with your dad. He trusted me to hold these for you and your mom if anything happened." Inside the box were journals, photos, and my father's watch. She looked me in the eye and said, "There were rumors, but your father never betrayed his family. He talked about you and your mom all the time. He loved you both." My mother appeared in the doorway. Sarah gave her a sealed envelope. As my mother read it, tears streamed down her face. "Your father never left us." "I did, but I want to come back," she said. I reached for her hand. Between the sawdust, the hammers, and the words of the man who built this house, something inside us began to heal. During the plea negotiations, Mr. Harris slid the folder of evidence across the desk to Tom. "You've run out of ground to stand on," he said. Tom's bravado crumbled. The threats and the bluster were gone. He slumped in his chair as the terms were read: full restitution, assigned confession, and prison time. Days later, my father's army buddies started showing up, bringing back the items he had pawned. They placed them on the dining table, shaking my hand in silent solidarity. "He told us lies, but your father's truth is safe now," one of them said. The neighbors also rallied around us, bringing casseroles and offering support. For the first time since I returned, I felt the weight of Tom's isolation lift. 3 weeks later, the house was transformed. The built-ins were back in the living room, the floors were polished, and the dining table was ready for family meals. That night, my mother and I sat at the table, enjoying a home-cooked meal. After dinner, I pulled out my laptop to finish a report for work. New York was still my world, but I knew this house would always be a part of me. As I stand on the porch now, looking at the house and my mother, I know that we've come a long way. The house has been rebuilt, and our family is on the path to healing. It's no longer a battlefield but a home, reclaimed and alive again.